Hey, what's up? This is Chosen. Happy New Year. 2022 is upon us, and I've got a couple fun videos planned to kick off 2022. I didn't want to combine these into one video and make it an hour long, so I want to go over in this one talking about the fusions. Let's take a look back at all of the fusion and fragment champion events that we had in 2021, and we can have a little bit of reflection on how they ended up like being added to raid, what they brought to the game, if it was a good or a bad addition, things to just kind of reflect on the champions that were added to the game and the events that we had. And then I'll have another one where we talk about all the other changes in raid, quality of life stuff, promotions, and just kind of try to wrap up the year of 2021 in a couple of videos here on the channel. So this one will be diving into all of the fusion events. Let's get into it. Alrighty, so first of all, the first fusion we had in the year of 2021 was Iron Brago back in January of 2021, and they did a pretty good job with Iron Brago. He's not going to be some S tier champion or anything, but he's a really good progression champion. He's got a really cool passive that's just guaranteed value of 10% of this champion's defense. He's got a really high base defense, so you can really get a lot of value out of that. You'll see him paired in like tag team arena with somebody like a Valkyrie, who you want a ton of defense on, who places insane shields based on defense. He's also got an aura in the Doom Tower of 34%, so you can really build some tanky teams in tag team arena, Faction Wars, the Doom Tower, and get a lot of value out of his passive here as an ability. So I think he was a pretty solid addition to the raid roster to kick off 2021. Then next in February of 2021, we had an event for Astrolon. Now, Astrolon pairs with Countess Lix, who I believe Countess Lix was the first time that Plarium ever had a guaranteed summon event. I think it was like 150 Ancients for Countess Lix, and that was their first voyage into that, or at least one of the first. But anyway, for Astrolon, he could be a really good nuker. He doesn't see as much play as I thought he would. He's a pretty solid champion. And I think they were designing him to be a counter to Veil. You see all these arena teams with Rector, with Duchess, and I think him being a very strong person against that to remove all buffs from anybody that has Veil and then weaken them. He's also got a very reliable stun. He can be an AoE nuker, so he doesn't get used as much as I thought he would as a counter to some of those Veil teams, but he's definitely a pretty solid champion. Then in March, we had Yoshi, the drunkard, obviously in honor of St. Patrick's Day. So this was the third St. Patrick's Day fusion event that Raid has done since their release in kind of the early days of 2019. So back in 2019, their first St. Patrick's Day was Shamrock, and then the next year in 2020, they had an event for Killian, and then in 2021, in March around St. Patrick's Day, they had Yoshi the Drunkard, who I think was a good choice for an event. You get a support champion out there as an introduction to the Shadowkin faction. I think he'll be in a lot of those first Shadowkin teams because he's got the speed aura. He can increase accuracy on your entire team, which is really good for progression. You can book it to a 3-turn cooldown. Also can play some True Fear, do some more damage. He can also decrease accuracy. Like he's got CC in the A1. He's got a passive to cycle through turns. Some pretty decent base stats. So yeah, I think not a godly champion, but a very solid choice to get people an introduction and get people with a support champion to have available for them when they're starting to build those Shadowkin rosters, which, by the way, we should have Shadowkin Faction Wars coming to the game within the next month or two. So remember your Yoshi the Drunkard if you were around for the fusion for him, because I think he'll be a good starter to kind of start basing a team around. Then in the middle of April, we had a very tough event for Under Priest Brogni. This was probably, I'm trying to think, this was probably the toughest fusion to complete in 2021, but looking back on the year as a whole, probably justified because he's probably the best fusion champion that we had available to us in 2021. Just an insane kit. He blocked debuffs, and you've heard me talk about this before if you watch most of my videos, but I was talking about a long time how I thought a power creep we were going to start to see in the game is champions that on one ability can both remove buffs from enemies and also cleanse debuffs on allies, and he does that actually here on the A2. He's going to be both removing some of the buffs, attack on enemies, remove one random buff, and then also removing a random debuff from allies, and then you'll also place a shield on top of that. So obviously this guy is awesome. Tag team arena, amazing in faction wars. Dwarves used to be one of the toughest factions to complete. Underpriest Brogni was big in helping people get through that content. He's used in a lot of Doom Tower comps, in the Hydra. Just an extremely solid champion, one of the best non-void legendaries in the game in terms of just general utility and what he brought to the game. So they definitely knocked it out of the park with him as a fusion, but it was probably the toughest fusion character to get in the whole year of 2021. Then in May, we were introduced to Rule the Huntmaster. Now, this was kind of when they were really trying to make Hex a thing in the early days of trying to make Thea and Rule and really start to get a bunch of things in the game that compare with Hex, because Hex itself doesn't actually do anything. It just unlocks other abilities that are going to pair with Hex. So it's very unique in how it functions in that way, but it also means it's very hard to get consistent value out of Hex. So like maybe Rule will age well as we get more and more stuff pairing with Hex, and you can really build dedicated Hex teams. Like maybe in the tag team arena, you've got your 2 teams, then your 3rd team is a very Hex centric team where you've got Hex unlocking like 12 different things and you get insane value out of it. So Rule will probably age pretty well, but he doesn't see a whole lot of play after his fusion event from back in May. Then heading into the summer, into June, we had an event for Herndig, and if I had to guess, I would venture to say this was probably received the best by the community of all the fusion events in 2021. I think just the blend of how good he is versus how hard he was to get in the fusion, the blend of those two things, I think this event was one of the better ones they did in 2021. He's a very solid champion. He can be a Nightmare campaign farmer. I actually use him as my Nightmare campaign farmer and did a video on the stats and the build required to make that happen for you. People use him in the Hydra, faction wars. He can nuke, he can hit super hard. He just does so much stuff on his kit here with the decreased defense, the decreased accuracy, which is super critical. That's not very common in the game. Decrease accuracy on an AoE. So yeah, I think Herndig was probably the best in general for all the fusions in 21. They knocked it out of the park with him, and really not a whole lot to say other than that. I think he's a solid champion and was a cool event. And then Versof was going to kick off a stretch in the middle of the year where we kind of get a stretch of fusion champions that, like, they're not necessarily bad. It's just like they're decent. It's they're just like generally decent. But you don't really see them get talked a lot about, or maybe the community isn't raving about them a whole lot, and they're just kind of like, meh, they're all right, they're not trash, they're not great. And Versof definitely embodies that. If you were a new account though, and you got something like Versof, he's worth the books. He's a good progression champion. He's HP based, which is cool. He can protect your team, make your team a lot tougher. So placing provoke on a passive is super cool. So yeah, I mean, again, it's gonna kick off a stretch where not that bad, just nothing super amazing. Because right after that was Mother Sibylle, and like again, arguably the best aura in the game. There's only a few champions that have an all battle 24%. I think it's like Fushan, Lysandra, and Mother Sibylle. I think that's it in terms of a 24% all battle. And then the only speed auras that are higher than that is like your Arbiter, your Prince Kaimar, but they're going to be specific. Lady Kimmy for the Doom Tower. So an AoE that's going to decrease speed is just awesome. I love the A1, and she's got some cool things on her kit. It's just a little bit wonky. I think the A3 is really where they lost people. I think everything else is kind of cool and makes a little bit of sense here. But like also Revive on Death is tough to get consistent value out of, unless it's like a passive, like automatically proc Revive on Death, you know, with a 3-turn cooldown or something. Like, I don't know, but I think the Revive on Death and the A3 kind of lost people, but the A1 and the Aura and the passive, I mean, kind of cool. So, well, I shouldn't. The passive's also kind of weird, like fully healing when the champion's killed, and then you have Revive on Death. So, lots of just weird stuff to get value out of on a consistent basis. Is why Mother Sibylle kind of fell down the rung in terms of the community reception of her. But again, not that bad of a champion. Definitely some cool uses for her. Then in September, we moved on to Urric Wormbane, and again, we get another speed aura. We had like Yoshi and Mother Sibylle and Urric. We're getting a lot of these really good speed auras, but I mean, yeah, Urric is, I hate to sound like a broken record here and say the same thing every time, but Urric is kind of, I said we were going to get into that stretch heading into the middle of the year and heading into fall, where all these champions are like, meh, they're all right. I mean, Urric can be cool. He can steal turn meter, he can stun, he's got a really cool aura, and I've definitely seen some people use him. He just doesn't see a ton of play, unfortunately. Then we moved into an event for Sigmund the High Shield, who I think was designed to be a pretty reliable shield counter. You're going up against those teams with like Krisk in them. You've got the A1 that can just constantly come up and remove shields, and also another random buff, which I think is pretty cool on an A1, honestly. And again, he's pretty solid. You've got a multi-hitter AoE on a 3-turn cooldown of placing a provoke, and you pair him with a decreased attacker that gets super reliable for an AoE. His abilities are on a 3-3 cycle. He's going to make your team a lot tougher because he's going to place a shield on all allies, and also a strength. And I think maybe the downfall of Sigmund was his base HP is just too low. If that base HP was like 22.5 or something, I think he'd be a lot better and maybe see a little bit more play, but yeah, maybe just not quite tough enough to scale up with the base stat here. But the kit on paper, nothing wrong with it. He's an all right champ. And then we're getting closer to the present day, and we're getting into some of the events that you're probably going to start to remember off the top of your head here. And Vlad was going to be the Halloween Fusion, or not was going to be. He was the Halloween Fusion event for 2021. And also similar to the St. Patrick's Day, he was the third iteration of a Halloween champ. The first Halloween for Raid, we had, I'm blanking on it, Harvest Jack, the kind of pumpkin themed, jack-o'-lantern themed Harvest Jack. And then the next year on Halloween, we had an event for Elgato, who's also in the undead here. I think all of them are. I think we had Harvest Jack, and then Elgato, and yeah, and then right here, and then so Harvest Jack, Elgato, and then we had Vlad here. But like I think the problem with Vlad is he's a Void Legendary, and Void Legendaries, if they're going to be diluting the pool of Void Legendaries, they've really got to justify that. They've really got to pack a punch and be an awesome champion. I think what they were going for was a fusion that's maybe an option for people to deal with the Scarab. You've got the decreased max HP on the A1, so super reliable there. But I mean, he's just missing that little bit of oomph that he would need to really justify and carry the weight of being a Void Lego in Raid Shadow Legends. So nothing really super wrong with him as a champion, especially he had a little bit more oomph to him. Then right after that, the reason that we had 13 fusion events, fusion fragment events, whatever, in 2021 is because they had one so soon after they had Valdrax right away. Because Valdrax was an epic, so they actually did the same thing 2 years in a row. They snuck in an epic right after the Halloween fusion and snuck one in between well, not the holiday fusion, the Halloween fusion and the holiday fusion. They snuck one in between, and that's why in 2021 we had 13 fusion fragment events. But anyway, Valdrax was supposed to be, this was kind of like the time they were going to be sending the Hydra out live, and he was supposed to be a way to bring Hex to that fight so you can deal with the Head of Mischief, where you have to have Hex, or it's just going to deflect all of your attacks to a different head. We could talk about that in a different video, but I don't think it ended up serving as good of a purpose as it was supposed to. But he was an epic. The unfortunate thing is he does take a ton of books, a little bit too heavy on the book count there, but for being an epic, it is what it is. I just wish he would have been slightly better in filling that role. And then we get to present day on the event that just ended for Tatura Rhymehide. So got no problem with this event. Pretty decent champion, pretty solid, and the event was pretty realistic to complete for those people that manage their accounts and were in a spot to complete the event. So definitely way better than last year's event. I believe the holiday champions we have gotten were Tormin, and then last year was Pixneal, and then this year was Tatura. So Tatura is probably in the middle, but more towards Tormin. Tormin was the most game-changing when he came out. He was crazy, and then obviously Pixneal was a complete meme, and no one really used her. She takes 18 legendary books for a champion that's meh, so definitely was a meme. And then Tatura is in there in the middle, but slightly towards Tormin, being a decently solid champion and a pretty decent event. So that is all of the fusion and fragment champions that were added in 2021, and a quick reminder and a look at them. So that's going to do it for me on this one. Hope you're having a good start to your year, and as always, thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.